you for having us this month, repping NHSCYPAA, which is the New Hampshire State Conference of Young People and Alcoholics Anonymous. It is this weekend. I know there is one of us so far in this chat coming on up, which is so exciting. Yeah, so like I said, I grew up in New Hampshire, and my first memories are of fear. And that is something that absolutely stayed with me for a really long time. That started to manifest in what appeared to be some mental health issues. And I'm kind of a late bloomer. I didn't start drinking until I was, I think, 17. And I got sober at 20. So as you can imagine, that went downhill pretty quickly. And it was my solution. Like, those feelings of inadequacy, of not being good enough or not smart enough, or like I was a bad person, or like I would never amount to anything, like all those feelings went away. And it was with like peace and serenity, kind of like the promises that we get through going through the steps, except with alcohol. And it became my true love. Nothing else mattered. It didn't matter who you were, what kind of relationship that we had. It was just about me getting what I needed. And the person I was began to change very quickly. And it became really evident that there was something going on. I was somebody who was on track to go to a really prestigious university for public speaking. And, you know, I was involved in so many things, going on missions trips, you know, going all over the country. And I found something better to do. And those things that I loved began to fall away, right? And it wasn't a whole lot. Like, I'm not somebody who, like, lost a house or a husband or a job, really, or any of that stuff. But what did end up happening was that every piece of Megan was gone. And I thought that the alcohol was the only thing that was keeping me okay. And like I said before, it escalated very quickly. It went from something that, you know, I started doing on the weekends, and then I found myself in this state of obsession. And I didn't really understand what that meant at the time, and I didn't even know that it was abnormal. I just found myself constantly thinking about alcohol, and I would get into this space where there would be absolutely nothing. No person, no event, no feeling within myself that was going to stop me from drinking. And that's how it was. And that's how I lived my life. And I didn't understand that there was anything wrong with that. And I didn't understand why once I started drinking, like, I couldn't stop. I was somebody who used to coach myself before I drank to not spill this lie that I've been holding on to, because I was very aware of the fact that, like, once I start drinking, I have no idea where I'm going. I used to try to control my drinking in a lot of really interesting ways. Usually it was like I tried to control it with the container that it was in. For me, that looked like wine glasses. Like, I just had it in my head for some reason that, like, if I drink this out of a wine glass, like, this time it'll be okay. Like, this time I'll drink like a lady, and I'll have one glass and I'll go to bed. And I did have one glass. And I put it in the fridge. And then out came the vodka bottle out of the closet. And I thought that I had controlled it. Like, I thought that I had beat this thing. And that's really as good as it got. Except for the times that I did manage to stay sober or abstinent from alcohol for a day or two. That was the worst. That was where, looking back, where my alcoholism had really taken place. I became really violent. They used to describe me as Tornado Megan, because I would just have these outrageous temper tantrums. couldn't wait for the alcohol just to make that okay, even for a minute. And after a couple years, that feeling of relief started to go away. And my body would be drunk. People would be telling me how drunk I was. But all those thoughts that were happening, all that, like, the 5 radio stations going on in my head, the suicidal thoughts, like, all of those things were happening when I was drunk. And I didn't know how to make them stop. I'm not somebody that had an incredible step 1 experience, which is kind of like coming to understand that, like, you know, I'm powerless over alcohol. It was more of just kind of like a morbid acceptance that that was the situation and that there was nothing that I could do about it. I felt so hopeless around that, and it was so clearly evident to me that my life was unmanageable. I, at 17, moved out of my house and slept in my car and in walk-in closets for a really long time. And I thought that I had, like, had it made. And eventually those things caught up to me, those lies caught up to me. And so it was really clear that, like, I can't keep doing this. But I don't have a way out. And I can't imagine continuing to live my life with all this drinking, but I can't imagine not doing that. And I can't do that even if I wanted to. I couldn't stop drinking even if I wanted to. And I just believed that I would die by the age of 23. And I actually just turned 23 a few months ago. So that's actually really cool. And then finally, somebody did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And they took me from where I was living in Massachusetts, and they brought me to my dad's house in New Hampshire. And I'm really blessed to have an entire family in Alcoholics Anonymous. I grew up, I was like the little kid in the corner, like with the coloring book. And I loved AA. Even before I had ever drank, like, you guys were my people. I loved it. And so my dad took me in. And he just loved me. And I had this moment of complete surrender. I didn't have anything left. I was like a shell of a human, and I couldn't do it anymore. I don't know how else to describe. I mean, how do you describe like the insanity that comes along with active alcoholism? But there was part of me that knew what to do. I had grown up, I was somebody who loved God. That's actually what I did before I ever started drinking, was I was on like every worship team and like youth group and going to church and doing all these beautiful things, and that's what I sought in my life. And when I started drinking, that was the first thing to go. But when I had that moment of surrender, it was so clear to me that I needed something bigger than me. At the time, I thought to make the feelings go away because they were so painful. I had no idea that there was a level of life that I've been blessed with now. And so I spent like 2 weeks like sobbing in my bed and like trying to, apparently people were bringing me to meetings. I don't even remember that. And I eventually ended up going into the hospital for psychiatric reasons. And there, a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous came in. And a German woman, a friend of mine named Danny, described to me the disease of MOA, she called it. And that when she's climbing the tree, right, the tallest tree she can find, she's halfway up and she's already looking for the next tallest tree. And that was the first real description of alcoholism that I had ever heard. And it's just an analogy, but I got it. And then they talked about the hope that they had found and this new life. And I had never heard about that before. I never believed that that could be true for me. And so when I left the hospital, I went to AA meetings, and I was one of those newcomers who was like so excited to be there. Like just the thought of like having hope and a new life and doing chips and making coffee. Like I felt so grateful to have a second chance. And I got a sponsor, and she took me, and I remember reading the doctor's opinion with her. I don't remember understanding anything about what it said, but I did what she told me to do. And I eventually made my way. I took my third step, and I started writing a fourth step. And then I found another solution, which for me looked like relationships. So I jumped from relationship to relationship, and I didn't need to do my step work anymore. I felt because I felt better. And that sponsor told me that that wasn't going to work, so I fired her and got a new one and made it back to my fourth step, and that sponsor told me the same thing, and this was repeated over and over and over again until 7 months sober. I'm back in the psych ward wondering how it happened, wondering why I want to kill myself again. Without a solution, I don't know how to do life. Without a solution, I'm spiritually bankrupt. And so I left that hospital, I think at 8 months sober. And I was once again gifted with this fire, this desperation to really do it. And I got a sponsor. And she really took me through the steps, and she kept me really accountable. And I spent a lot of time understanding, this sounds like heresy, but the twofold disease, I know, that it's a disease of the mind and body, and that I'm spiritually sick, and how all those things interact with each other. And that maybe, just maybe, I don't understand who God is. But maybe he would help me, or she, if I sought them. And she took me to a really special place, and I took my third step. It was the first place where I ever had a spiritual experience in sobriety. And I started writing my fourth, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and it was hard, and I know a lot of people are scared of the fourth step, but it was necessary. Alcohol is not my problem. It's that I've been separated from a power greater than me. And there's these things, right? Resentment, fear, self-seeking behavior. All these things separate me from that power greater than myself. Whatever it is, my first higher power was the Force, and then it was Yoda. So, like, you can use that if you want. I know, it's pretty cool. And those things needed to be removed. And so I wrote my fourth step, and then I shared it with her. And afterward, I took an hour with God. And I made sure that up until that point, everything that I had done so far was solid. And she gave me a very long list of my character defects, and I proceeded to try to remove them myself. And I don't recommend that. It didn't work very well. In fact, I ended up going through a lot of pain because of that, but I'm also really grateful for that. And then I continued, and I moved on to make my list of amends. And I then made most of my amends and then stopped. And I hit pain again. And so it's been this back and forth up until this point of like the struggle with willingness. Like sometimes I just don't have it. And I was about 1.5 years sober, making some amends, or I had stopped making some amends, and in so much pain. And someone suggested to me that I move forward with my step work. And so I reached out to a girl that I used to drink with. And she said, you know what, Meg, like, I don't think that you owe me an amends. I don't really feel like you did anything wrong, but I just want you to know that I'm going to be detoxing on my couch this weekend. And, I was blessed with the tools to help her get into detox. And afterward, after she went to treatment, she messaged me and said, you know what's incredible? We thought that whatever, the universe had brought us together just for that time. But there was such a greater plan for us that we would meet years down the road. And I love that story because it's true. There was a greater plan for us, but the best part is that she's the one that realized it. Seeing this program not only work in myself, like, yeah, that's beautiful, and I'm so grateful for it, and I can find peace and serenity, but real joy comes when I get to see other people get this. When I get to see my sponsees start taking other women through the work and see them get lit up. And like, I'm getting hot and like, I just love it. Like, it just lights me up, and it's so beautiful. And you know, we talk a lot about a life run on self-will, right? Can hardly be a success. I actually just took my 3rd step, which is really exciting tonight, like an hour ago. But having gone through them, right? And having, you know, resentment, fear, self-seeking behavior, pride, all these things start to be removed, my character defects, I get to align my will with God's, or the universe, or Yoda's, or whatever. And I get to find joy in the things that my higher power finds joy in. And that's what gives me purpose. It's not my career, it's not my relationship, or the car, or financial stability. It's not any of that stuff. I can find peace in surrender and humility, in giving over the things that I worked so hard to hang on to, is where I found freedom. And it's available. And I'm so grateful to be able to speak at this meeting. It definitely feels weird, like talking into my phone, but I think it's so awesome that everybody can be connected in this way. So once again, thank you for having me. I'm Megan, I'm an alcoholic.